We are going to welcome 4 human beings and our chatbot back to the panel.
Thank you so much.
To get the human side of this debate. We've been talking a lot about what AI can do and what the courts can do to solve some of these problems where the humans meet the machines. But we want to spend at least part of the day really hearing about the impact on humans of AI and how this can shape the future of their lives and their careers. And so we are so honored to have 4 very stellar representatives from different parts of the entertainment industry to talk about how this is particularly affecting their constituencies. But while they get settled and before we get started, we just want to bring our chatbot into this debate a little bit. What is the name of this panel, Chris Castle? Can integrity and innovation survive without artist consent? That's really the name of the panel. That's what our humans are going to spend some time talking about it. But let's let the chatbot answer that question from their perspective first. This is not choreographed. We're just putting this in real live time. Okay, artist consent matters. Well, thank you. There's some tension. Yes. So I see that the core conflict is about integrity and consent, and why artists' consent matters. The chatbot is going to outline the ethical foundations, the legal precedents, the cultural identity, but can innovation thrive without consent? And in short, the chatbot says yes, but at a cost. And so what I want to spend some time talking about this morning, but I hope that we will spend some time in all conversations about AI, is what that cost is. What is that cost to humans? What is that cost to individuals that make their living by being creative, OG creative, that they are coming up with the content that all of the bots are training on. So we are really honored to have this esteemed panel here. We have Erin McAnally from the Songwriters of North America, Josh Hurvitz representing the independent music labels, so the lesser known music labels, but still very independent and creative. Kevin Amer from the Authors Guild. We've heard a lot this morning about authors and how they will play into this. And Jennifer Jacobsen from the Artist Rights Alliance. And what I'd like to do to start, if you can, is talk about you and your role with your organization, but also if you could just take a few minutes and describe how your members and your individual creators have been affected by AI thus far. This is the 2nd annual roundtable we've done here. A lot has changed in the last year. So maybe talk about kind of some of those threats to creators that they've experienced thus far. Erin, please kick us off.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you for having me. My name is Erin McAnally. I am a human songwriter. I am the daughter of a songwriter. I am married to a songwriter. I am the daughter-in-law of a songwriter, so I'm steeped in human songwriting. I am also the executive director of Songwriters in North America. We are a membership-based trade organization representing about 1,000 songwriters from around North America and the world. On a personal level, there's a lot of hesitancy with the development of AI, but also recognizing that it can be very helpful. And that's something that we hear from our members, is that there are aspects of it that they enjoy using, but the sort of existential threat of being replaced is something that we're also discussing and is more, I think, more prevalent than the excitement about it. Just scrolling social media, already we're seeing production music is being replaced very quickly, and it's being replaced with such horrible, jingles are so important, right, for marketing, for advertising, because they get stuck in your head. And these jingles that AI output is creating, it's like there's no rhythm, there's no rhyme, there's no melody, but it's so prevalent in our feeds where it's like, this is what procrastination looks like, and it's like there's it's some procrastination medication or something, but so that seems to be the first level of songwriting that's being replaced, and so that's sort of the canary in the coal mine and what we're looking at right now.
Josh, you gonna sing?
No, but thank you for referencing procrastination, which ties to like attention span. And now I have jingles stuck in my head, so this is going to be challenging. I've just got like Eastern Motors, my job's my credit, the whole thing going for those of you that live in DC.
No cars for kids, please. No cars for kids.
So I'm Josh Hurvitz. I work at a lobby firm here in Washington called NVG, and have had the good fortune of representing A2IM and helping them with their policy advocacy for about the last 5 years. Linda, Chris, Richard Burgess, A2IM CEO, sends his regrets. I guess it would have been like Richard, me, then an AI chatbot. So, just have to beat the competitive class up there on the board.
They asked the chatbot, and the chatbot wasn't available. So.
Yeah, maybe. So I think A2IM comes at this from a really interesting perspective, which is that in the competitive marketplace every day, indie labels are marketing the idea that they can help artists find a way to be professionals in their craft of making art, right? That one day they might not have to also 10 bar or do something else, that they could make their living making music. And often indie labels are the entry point for people that are making that jump, which I think we all think is a good thing, and in fact is grounded in the Constitution in terms of furthering creation of art. And every day they're out there in the marketplace in a world based through this kind of like attention economy where the distribution of music is harder and harder to actually find your real fans and connect, right? People listening to, algorithmically served music, allowing, Spotify or Pandora to kind of decide what's next. And so that connection is really frayed. And I think that A2IM members look at the other piece of the chain, which is the music creation, and see a similar fraying happen, where the ability to have the output, the music, be connected to the heart and soul and the stories and the life experiences of the creator is frayed as well. And for indie labels, these are for-profit entities, but a lot of them internalize the idea of being stewards of a genre, right? So like I grew up in the 90s, and you can't think of a band like Nirvana without thinking of Sub Pop, the indie label that they were on. There's a guy named Bruce Ilgauer who runs a label called Alligator Music that is the go-to label for blues music. And his life's work has been finding artists, generally from obscurity, and helping them with a way to make a living with this music craft that wouldn't be out there as broadly in human consciousness if not for what he's done. And so kind of all that blends together for me into what are we going to end up with as this all plays out. And that's not just about the businesses that are behind it, but also, most importantly, which is why it's great that this panel is happening, the creators that make it. Can I actually ask, Kevin, I know I'm like going and got to pass the baton, but can I ask a question quickly of the crowd? How many people here are professors or students? Yeah, awesome. So glad that you guys are here. And Linda, I think it's great that that you've centered this work here at AU. And the reason why is that growing up, I knew people who were music fans first and dreamt one day of maybe working in the music industry. You don't have, I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, like the insurance capital of the world. There weren't kids walking around being like, man, I love insurance. It's awesome. Right? And so this whole thing I was talking about before on like kind of tastemaker, seeing what's coming in consumption, I think like we need the education, having this piece of it is really important, or else we're gonna lose.
Thank you. Makes
Kevin,
sense.
over to you.
Thanks so much. I love insurance. No.
There's a jingle.
Yeah.
Do the jingle.
There's some good ones.
Yeah.
State Farm is
Thank
there.
you. Thanks, Linda, for having me. And it's really great to be here. So I'm Kevin Amer. I'm Chief Legal Officer with the Authors Guild. We are the oldest and largest professional association for working writers. And, you know, like a lot of the speakers we've heard today, I just wanted to talk about some of the impacts that we're already seeing from the unauthorized use of authors' works for generative AI. It has real harm for working writers, and it shows up in a number of ways. So, I mean, the first way I think is market dilution. We're already seeing evidence of sort of knockoff books that are flooding the market, AI-generated books that appear on Amazon that are clearly timed to coincide with the release of a bestseller and to siphon off sales from that book. They show up, you know, the day of or even before the book is released. You know, we're already seeing knockoff AI books in certain genres, genre fiction like romance and thrillers, and you know, types of books that are easier to sort of reproduce with AI. And what are the consequences of this? Well, I mean, so for one, you know, as you'd expect, publishers are going to have fewer resources to invest in up-and-coming writers, right? You know, we often say that it's you know, the effect might not be on sort of the best-selling authors of the world, Stephen King and so forth, but as publishers have fewer resources to take chances on up-and-coming new writers, there's going to be, you know, a long-tail effect. And part of that is that, you know, and Josh touched on this in terms of, you know, how important it is to have people who can make a living as creators, right? And who, you know, can choose that as their profession and make a living. And we, you know, we agree and feel strongly that the copyright system is really intended to allow that, right? To incentivize people to benefit from their works and in turn to be able to make a living. Book authors, you know, often, as is true in other fields, rely on other types of writing, freelance journalism, advertising, web content, etc., to make a living while working on, you know, their passion projects, right? Working on their next novel. And one thing that inevitably is going to happen is that AI-generated works are flooding those markets too, right? I mean, how, you know, every time you go on Google, you're seeing journalism that is pretty clearly AI-generated. You know, so AI is, you know, is taking work away in those areas too. And I think, you know, the result is going to be fewer talented people who can devote themselves to writing as a profession, right? And we think there's a, you know, obviously a real harm to that. So that's market dilution. Secondly, you know, we think authors have a right to expect to participate in the licensing market for AI training, right? I mean, and we know that this is a market that is developing rapidly. We've seen numerous reported examples of publishers and news organizations striking deals with AI companies to license their works for training. You know, we think that authors, it just sort of as a matter of fairness, should have a piece of that market, right? The LLMs could not exist without authors' works. And, you know, we always sort of try to make the point that quality matters, right? Like if AI companies just needed words, they could go and scan every dictionary in the world, but they don't want that. They want sort of professionally edited, produced, high-quality writing that can make their products more lucrative. And so, you know, we really think it's no different than, you know, if they said they didn't have to pay for the electricity or the infrastructure that they need for their data centers. I want to wrap up. I know we have more conversation. I just also finally wanted to touch on this sort of the idea that sort of to the extent that taking these pirated works from these pirated websites is considered fair use, the logical sort of outcome of that is it's just going to incentivize more piracy. You're going to have a ready market of the richest companies, the tech companies in the world, who have an insatiable need for books. It doesn't take an economist to know that that's going to only encourage more pirates and more pirate websites to try to get a piece of that and get in the action. And we just, we know that the harm of piracy is real and significant for creators. So we think that's a bad thing. I'll stop there.
Jen Jacobsen.
Thank you. I first want to know if we think that a human or AI chatbot wrote liberty, liberty, liberty. 'Cause I don't know that qualifies as
Again, insurance.
amazing soul-searching art, but I'm Jen Jacobsen. I'm the executive director of the Artist Rights Alliance, which is an artist-led nonprofit that represents the interests of musicians, performers, songwriters. We work very closely with all these organizations. Well, not so much with you, but maybe in the future with these guys. And our board is made up entirely of artists and some managers. We have a music council of artists, about 100 artists. We were co-founded by musicians, including Roseanne Cash, and we try to just get the artist voice at the table for discussions like these at this table. I think when I think of the impact of AI on artists and musicians, I kind of break it down into 3 buckets, and we've talked about it a lot already, but just to kind of clarify the way I think about it, it's the impact on artists, the impact on art, and the impact on society. So the artists, we've talked about this a lot already, with musicians themselves, they get this double whammy, right, of having their work stolen and not getting paid for it to create this piece of something. And then that thing that was created on their backs with stolen material is then competing with them in the marketplace. So that's this double economic whammy. And the market dilution piece that we talked about. It gets harder and harder for you to have your work be noticed out there in this increasingly crowded AI space. So that's, and artists just don't know where this is leading and what this means to have a profession as an artist. But we talk a lot about, in our organization and with my board, about the impact on art itself. And so we've discussed this a little bit already, but when you have like the massification of music, for example, what does it mean to have a song that not only people don't know was not created by a human, but actually they begin not to care? And I think we see that already in certain types of music. Erin was referring to this, and Josh was too. We see it in types of music. It could really expand, where people are like, oh, that's good enough, that's fine. And we lose the sense of like, what is amazing art, what is good art, and like our actual tastes will change, and is that okay? And part of it is that we won't have the choices because the dilution can be so great that this is all we're presented with. And then this third piece of the impact on society, I've been thinking a lot about this more like in the context of this unbelievable polarization we're seeing and violence related to it, that when you have humans expressing themselves, it's a way of discussing or expressing yourself that's not violent. And it also reminds people that we all have something in common. Like, we're human and we can share tastes in music even if we don't share tastes in politics or anything else. And when that goes away and you're not connecting, artists aren't connecting with each other, artists aren't connecting with their audiences, that's an additional threat to democracy, I think. And not to mention the second piece of the impact on humanity is even broader than just on democracy. It's about like how we feel as people. Like, this is such an increasingly isolated, alienated world with our social media and the fact that we don't communicate person to person as much as we used to. And music, human music, is a way through that, or at least to help mitigate that. And the less human music we have, the more isolated we will be. If we're sitting in our rooms on our social media listening to music that was created entirely by machines, like where does that leave us as people to be connected? So on that cheery note.
That's a great point, though. I heard this quote last week and bears repeating. Art is humanity, but humanity is also art and comes out in art. And if you take the human away from that, what is left? The itty, I guess. Itty. Human itty. That's not, nobody wants that. They want the human. They want the humanity. Great point, Jen, and thank you all for just kind of the state of play right now. And it is dismal. It's dark right now, I think, for a lot of the humans out there. But Josh, Erin, Jen, in the music world, Josh, you kind of alluded to what the services are doing. And Jen, you made the point, people might not know that the music they're listening to has been created by a bot. They might not care. But I wanted to ask, in your opinion, from the artist label songwriter side, are the services that serve up that music to their fans, to those listeners, are they doing enough? The Spotifys of the world, the Amazons of the world, the Google, are they doing enough to flag or differentiate those AI-generated tracks?
Well, I don't think they are. I think it's for a variety of reasons, though. The incentive isn't there for them to do that, and they have to make money, and that's, they are incentivized to do what they need to do for their shareholders. So one, can we change those incentives somehow? And two, is the technology there? I mean, in some cases, it to some extent it is. I know there are people even in this room thinking about solutions that can help with that, with labeling and communicating to the public how much AI is in a particular piece of music. But they're not readily available and or permeating the marketplace now. So we need to do a better job on that part too. I'm sure other people have.
Josh, anything to add? You're the one that brought up the services.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a twisted knot. There are, fundamental questions raised by the Copyright Office guidance and other things related to copyrightability as it comes to at least, wholly AI created works that then flow into questions about what royalty pools look like. This is an issue that predates in a lot of ways AI created music. The question of should it count when you basically have a royalty distribution system that's about slicing up a pie. Should the ocean sounds that I put on repeat to play all day long in the hope that it will lull my dogs into not flipping out every time that a squirrel goes by or the wind blows some leaves, count in that, right? There, was a lot of discussion about investments by companies like Spotify in podcasting. Every minute in a world where people have limited time that they're listening to a podcast versus listening to a song is a minute that doesn't have a relationship to royalties that have to be paid, which is a cost that they can't as readily control or predict as just cutting a check to Joe Rogan for however much the market might demand for that. So, I hope for a world where consumers demand, and I think some will, a differentiation, where tools emerge like an ability to toggle on off the inclusion of fully AI created music in playlists that you might get, or algorithmic music that might be served to you through the quote unquote station that you're listening to. But I think in the current environment, it's going to take partnership for things like that to emerge, and I'm not sure that partnership will be aligned with the present kind of economic profit best interest of some of the platforms, and that's why I'm worried.
And again, just to interrupt or build on your point, like we need, so for consumers to push for that, we need consumers to care and want that. And like, how do we get there? Like, how much do consumers want to know whether their stuff is created by AI or not? I don't know the answer to that, and I hope they still care, but maybe that's probably a lot on us to help educate about why they should care.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, Kevin, in your industry, do people actually want to read the next great book, or do they just want to have enough information so they can get by with the social capital of sounding to their friends like they read the next great book? And if the answer is the latter, then they can just read the AI overview and be done.
Right. No, I mean, I think, by and large, people still want human-authored books, one question that I sort of like to ask people, if you found a book that you just really loved and it really spoke to you and it really made an impact, and someone after you read it, someone then told you that it was AI generated, would you care? Would you be bothered by that? I think most people would, because there is something about that connection with the author, just as absolutely true with music, that you're looking for, right? So, yeah, I do think that people prefer human-authored works in terms of the types of works that they consume, for pleasure or for, for knowledge and so forth. I do think, the risk, I think, or what we're starting to see is this sort of, the creep of AI-generated works in things like, web searches, right, and advertising and short online articles and background music and so forth. I don't think we're at the point, and hopefully we'll never get to the point where people sort of are choosing or don't care whether, their favorite music that they listen to for pleasure is AI generated. But I do think, we are starting to see the creep of AI generated works in other types of writing and music, and hopefully people care about that, but I think it remains to be seen.
I think the music business has become intoxicated by how many more listeners of music there are than there used to be because of digital music. It changes fanship, right? Because in the 90s, I worked at Tower Records, and I made $5.25, and I spent every single penny on $20 CDs because I was a huge music fan, right? That the music business could exploit me because I was a fan. I think that there will be a point at which there's less focus on the sort of casual fan, the fan that might have only listened to free radio in the car in the 90s, right? Or only have heard it in the drugstore or in the restaurant. I think there will be a better relationship between actual music fans and creators that hopefully arises out of this. To answer your question, Linda, I think the simple answer is no. And I don't want to give a pass to the services because we oftentimes are on opposite sides of the field. But I do think that it's right now it's nearly impossible. I mean, our industry has created a world where we're rife for being taken advantage of because of bad data. And so, like, I was thinking, Josh, when you were talking about, we share a mutual friend, and Jody Whalen, the head of Oh Boy Records, and he recently posted a series of photos on Instagram about all of these AI-generated artists that were claiming to be things that he represented or things that he cared about. And the market is flooded. With people uploading those. So yes, there's responsibility on the digital service side, but there are also real life pirates out there trying to take advantage of these holes in our systems.
That's a great point. And talking about the role of the services, there's a role for everybody to play, right? And even for the creators themselves to be able to identify their works and see if they're being exploited. Let's talk for a minute about the role of the labels, because we're starting to hear about some of these deals that are trying to be cut. There's settlements that Kevin talked about in terms of the Bart's case and how those statutory damages come into play. But if labels do get to the point where they start licensing their catalogs to train AI models, are they protecting artists by doing that? Or are they selling artists out by doing that?
Well,
And-
does anyone want to go first? I have some opinions. I think where we really want to get to, hopefully all of us on both the content side and the technology side, and if you're a responsible, ethical player in this marketplace, you want to get to a place where there's a good licensing system that works. And we are fortunate to have major labels who do care about protecting art and artists, have the leverage to be able to start us towards that marketplace, in that they have the power to make those deals. And I think they are trying to make good deals for themselves, but many artists benefit from that, right? There are many artists, however, who do not get the benefit of those deals because they're not signed with those labels, and they don't get to be at the table. They don't get to be at the table because they don't have market power. Like small independent artists don't have market power, and a few of us here have been working on legislation. Josh has been working on it the longest of any of us, called the Protect Working Musicians Act, which we hope will be introduced very soon, that would allow small artists, labels, songwriters, publishers to have this kind of leverage by allowing them to collectively negotiate with not only large streaming services for streaming rates and deals, but with AI companies. So that even if you're not signed to a major label, you can have some leverage to say, like, all of us need to see X, Y, and Z in terms of consent and compensation, or we're not going to enter into this deal with you. That only works, we need the market power, but B, that only works if there is a licensing system that people want to participate in. And I do think the major labels are helping with that, but we can't rely on that.
Did you agree with that, Josh?
Yeah, I think I do. The legislation that Jen mentioned would provide an additional tool in the event that a real licensing marketplace emerges. The idea that Microsoft or Google or Amazon needs antitrust protection from a few indie labels that want to band together and come to the negotiating table with joint forces is, I think, pretty laughable on its face. A piece here, and so the bill would help with that. A piece here, too, is the fact that major tech companies have, through the various cycles of their innovation, basked in the fact that legal uncertainty benefits them. And Kevin was kind of talking about all this litigation that's out there right now. And until there is greater certainty than there is today, that robust market that requires a willing participant on both sides of the table isn't going to be there. And so, the flat reality for indie labels, right? So it's 600 members, 35 states. A lot of them really small, is that they don't have the financial capacity to bring the sorts of lawsuits that, in this environment where Congress is so broken, is really the only path to get that certainty, right? And so, one thing that sticks in my mind is that A2IM polled their members a couple years ago, and it was about the DMCA and the use of the DMCA. And 50% of their members said, we've completely given up. The cost is too much for us. The upside in stemming the flow of pirated music just isn't there for us, right? And in the world that is that way, frankly, it's the larger market participants who do have the money to have very robust DMCA programs to bring litigation in that space, as they are now in the AI music space, that really represents the only cop on the beat. So we need that. And, I think that the other questions, who gets to participate, I'm sure, Erin, you have a lot of feelings there are really important. They're mostly really important if we can get over the hump of just rampant stealing and misappropriation.
If you're familiar with the plight of a songwriter, you know that consent is not a word that we're used to. So the idea of even being able to give it is enticing to us, because so much of our revenue is controlled by things that we don't or can't consent to. So the looking at what AI is using to create, making sure that the musical work is equitably remunerated or a part of the consent chain, I think is of the utmost importance.
Great point. And consent came up on the earlier panel, and it should be part of every discussion that we have. Not to be fatalistic, because we don't want to give up. We don't want to give up on things like the DMCA, like some of your members seem to. But if AI tools are trained on everything that's out there and everything that's already been made, and they're already out there in the marketplace, is the battle already lost? I'll look at Kevin Madigan too, because he's monitoring all these legal cases to track all of this. But if everything stopped today, all training had to stop today, but everything's already been out there, is the battle already lost? It's a dark question.
I don't think the battle's lost. If we imagine that world, I think we have to hold hope that the continued flow of human created work is still going to drive tastes, right? And so, 10 years ago when nobody knew who Dua Lipa was, if an AI model had gobbled up every song ever performed, and we were living in that world now, when you asked it, make me a song to play at my hip party that sounds like a Dua Lipa song, it wouldn't know how to do that, and it would have to go back and do further investigating. It would need to find additional inputs. And so I don't think that we should stop the conversation at training sets and be fatalistic. What I'm referencing is another thing that we need to figure out how to value, right? I mean, same with books, right? Like, who knows how many authors are out there working on nonfiction works about the current Trump administration that aren't even out yet. And in the future, people are going to ask questions of AI that would likely draw on that work, whether or not it trained on that work.
That's a great point. So it would apply to books as well, Kevin? Authors haven't given up?
No, I mean, I think, look, AI is not going away, and nor do I think we, want it to go away. I mean, obviously, it's an incredibly exciting and beneficial technology in so many areas. I do think, Josh made a really important point in that AI doesn't create anything truly new, right? It can only sort of mimic human creativity and regurgitate what it's been trained on. It can't sort of break any real new ground. I mean, even looking at this response, it sounds, I'm sure it'll get better, right? But I mean, it sounds like a little stilted and a little like something that, for any students here, you wouldn't want to turn in.
Yes, students, don't turn in that.
As an assignment. So, yeah, I think that, and I think most people agree with that, that human creativity is not just sort of, the creative arts are different, right, than sort of other industries that have sort of fallen by the wayside because of technology. I think we really need to recognize that human creativity is different, right, than sort of the Pony Express or something, and this isn't something that we should just sort of accept that, okay, well, machines can do this better and more cheaply and more efficiently. And I think most people understand that. People, recognize that that AI requires for it to continue to be effective and desirable, human inputs, human authored works. And so, I don't think the battle was lost. I think there will always be an important central place for human authored works.
Let's ask the chatbot about whether can AI come up with any, how did you phrase it, Kevin? With any new works? Any original
Truly original.
creative work, maybe. This has not been tested, so we'll see what Copilot has to say. Good question. Can AI come up with original works not derived from human artistry? Okay. AI cannot create truly original works that are entirely independent
That
of human
qualifier.
artistry, at least not in the way we define originality today.
That gives me the willies. Ooh.
Yes. Google's going to redefine originality. All right, well, at least it recognizes some limitations. Thank you for being humble, chatbot. No lived experience, right. That human emotion that I think you mentioned, Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I'm thinking of the movie Her right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hopeless romantic that I am.
Ask it if it's considered original in some other sense. Some people are trying to argue that.
Yes. Okay, does anybody have any questions for the chatbot or the humans? Professor Hughes.
I do have a question. So it all depends on how we define originality, because I always thought there was a time when a whole bunch of punks were making music, and then somebody came up with the idea, like Notting Hill in London, figure out how it happened, but how to merge reggae and punk. I think AI could do that. It could take two genres that have never been merged together, merge them, and we would consider that whole new genre original. It didn't really invent anything new. It just took two things that nobody else has defined yet. So we have to be careful on what our definition is.
Well, I would argue that ska might be a combination of punk and reggae.
But
I given-
ska was 60s before punk. Like,
Fair.
right? So, okay.
Any response to that other than ska came first?
I mean, it's a hard philosophical question because, in a sense, what are all of us doing is we're generating ideas that come from other ideas. Like, who had the first thought in humanity? Like, are any of our thoughts like truly original? Like they're based on nothing? But the fact that AI is doing it without any nod to human creativity, and also at this unbelievable speed that where the humanity's taken out of it, I think makes it a totally different scenario.
Right. And
Yeah.
this is an age-old question, right? What was the first original thought? But with respect to copyright law, right? So we can say Disney didn't come up with any of those princess movies. They're all based on the Brothers Grimm, but the Brothers Grimm had been in the public domain as defined by the Copyright Act when Disney decided to tell those stories in their own way. So respecting the Copyright Act that is in the Constitution and that the Founding Fathers felt important enough to put in the Constitution is important, and I think that's what we're missing.
I mean, if I could, just another piece of it is, yes, there's definitely people who make art for the benefit to themselves of making it. But I think, and Erin, correct me if I'm wrong, like most songwriters write their songs to tell their story to other people, right? And the response that you get back is a big part of it all, right? And so I don't think I want to kind of like do a bit of a like aggressive lane change, which I do a lot of on the road as well. The same AI creation companies are the folks who control whether the works get heard in the first place, right? Especially in a world where, yeah, the punk reggae mashed up thing that maybe is ska, maybe isn't, like, what does it look like if the same machines decide yes or no to, like, is everybody on the face of the earth going to hear this thing, and as a result, likely, the chances are higher that people will fall in love with it, versus like, nah, we're just gonna, we're gonna suppress that, right? We're not gonna pump that up. We're not gonna make it part of the slicing of people's attention. So I just don't want to like lose that piece too. The combining of market powers here is scary. Kevin Erickson was here earlier from the Future of Music. He does all this work in kind of the antitrust world as it collides with music. I think that's a piece too.
And Erin, as a songwriter, I mean, it's a great point that Josh just made. I mean, obviously you write because you probably need to, and you couldn't not do it. That's what a lot of creators have said over the years. But you also, in an ideal world, would be able to make a full-time living because you are writing and it is being shared with others. So where does that land in the new world of technology?
I know I always think about Gillian Welch is one of my favorite songwriters, and she has a song that's we're going to do it anyway, even if it doesn't pay, which is a beautiful sentiment, but it also makes me angry at the same time. I feel it deeply, but also I get mad at myself for feeling it. Because songwriters are better if they have more time to write songs. That's period. And the songs are better and they connect with other people more deeply if songwriters are given the time to develop that craft. So that's something that we think about and fight for on a day-to-day basis, in addition to fighting to strengthen our current revenue streams and look at new revenue streams. That's something that we do working together on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, I think that is the ultimate goal, is to create a world where more songwriters are able to spend that time developing the craft.
It's hard to write a song when you've been, I don't know, digging a ditch all day or whatever you're doing to pay the rent that month, so totally hear that. We have time for a couple more questions. I see one hand in the back. That's you. Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Yeah.
Jen, go.
I can chime in, and others can too. But so we have a hip hop producer on our board, and he feels, we've talked about this, like there are a lot of AI tools he uses in his work. He's very grateful for them. He really relies on them. They help do some of the things you're talking about, like build the lists and figure out where he's going to draw some of his source material from. But he also is very adamant that his creativity as a producer is vital in creating the piece of art that he ultimately puts out, and that he's hopeful, like we were all talking about, that consumers will continue to appreciate that and what the difference is between a human bringing their creativity to the process and a machine doing it. And regardless of whether consumers continue to appreciate that and care about it, the humans that are doing it do need to get paid. And I think if we continue on the path of like litigation, policy, education, they will, but we have to make sure that that happens.
Great answer. We are out of time for this panel. These are some of my favorite humans in the world, and they are my favorite humans because they spend their time in life representing human beings that need to get their viewpoints and voices amplified here in all of these important discussions, including today. So thank you very, very much for being here and for bringing that human perspective into this conversation along with the bots. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We're going to
Linda.
take about 10
Thanks so much.